Hello, everyone. Well, I'd say it's high time. Multiple sources are reporting that Zelensky had created a long range impact command to focus on the long range strikes within Russia, which makes a lot of sense. Ukraine's structured campaign for targeting objects deep inside Russia has been going on for several months now. And as I mentioned in the past, we're talking about two groups of objects. One is Russia's military industrial complex, such as parts of their military manufacturing, their military bases, storage, airfields, things like that, as well as the supply routes when they're using those particular roads to siphon troops, weapons, and supplies into Ukraine. Okay, so that's group number one. Group number two, of course, is Russia's oil infrastructure. So that makes sense. It's about time they actually had their own administration within Ukrainian military, the dedicated staff, the dedicated resources that are separate from the rest. That makes complete sense because especially since what they do is very, very different from what the rest of the army is doing. So we have short-range drones. We have short-range air, water, and land-going drones that are used specifically at the front. And of course, there is the logistics of front operations. Again, soldiers, supplies, equipment, etc. So that's one thing. Those long-range strikes, completely different type of planning, completely different type of equipment, the long-range drones, and completely different type of reconnaissance that has to be done. So I think all in all, that is a very good idea. And among other things, again, there is an ongoing campaign to basically impair Russians' access from Ukraine's coast as much as possible. This, not at all coincidentally, comes on the same day when Ukraine had struck the Ilsky oil refinery I told you about yesterday. That's another one of the largest, not the largest, but one of the largest ones in Russia's south. And again, this is all part of the same chain of events. So if you look where it's at, right, if you look where it is shipping to, and if you look at the locations and shipping routes from the other refineries that Ukraine had struck, you can see that Russia has a problem because basically we are talking about very widely spread damage. And one of the things that is happening is Russia having to reshuffle constantly from where and how they can transport fuel because of that. Because on the one hand, they have refineries that are targets. And on the other hand, they have pipelines and storage depots and shipping vessels that are also targets. So getting the oil from point A to point B, even if you manage to refine it, is getting harder and harder. I mean, Russia continues to escalate by bombing Kyiv, but also other cities. Again, this is something that doesn't get covered. Kyiv is the capital, so it gets more news space, so to speak. But just because Kyiv is getting bombed doesn't mean that other cities are left alone. So all of the other names, Kharkiv, Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, Mykolaiv, all of those are still getting pummeled. That hasn't gone away. That is still happening, and there are dead and wounded, and there's destruction in all of those. We just, like I said, we just don't get to hear about it. But here's what I was talking about. Russia has temporarily stopped shipping through the Don Azov Channel, a navigable waterway linking the Don River with the Sea of Azov. And of course, the Sea of Azov is their access to the Black Sea and to the Mediterranean. That is now cut off. So it continues to be a big question how the heck are they going to do anything or ship anything, because now we're not just talking about oil, we're talking about Russian exports in general, such as grain, for example. Now, they do have seaports of their own. They do have a chunk of Black Sea coast that they control, but that is currently and constantly under Ukraine's surveillance. So that is a problem too. They could try transporting this stuff directly to their Black Sea ports like Sochi and shipping from there, but I doubt it. Because we already know Ukraine has fired on those ports as well, successfully. We now have a confirmation on the tightening of sanctions on Russian oil. Lindsey Graham, whom I despise from the bottom of my heart, said that he's very pleased, but Lindsey will flip whichever way his boss tells him. He's, all of that. If tomorrow Trump says, no, we have to loosen those sanctions again, he will support that as well. A reminder, those sanctions on Russian oil were loosened for 2 months by this administration because of the war in Iran, which this administration had started and can't seem to finish. So, just a reminder to everybody what is going on. And once again, Russia is firing on the areas they claim to want to liberate and save from Ukraine, such as, for example, Kramatorsk, where 4 people were killed, including a teenager. At least 9 people there were injured. So, again, all this thing about rescuing Ukraine from itself, it's bullshit. This is all crap. All Russia wants is Ukrainian submission, Ukrainian resources, Ukrainian industry, Ukrainian land. That is the problem. That is the cause of this war. They want that for themselves. They want to restore the Russian Empire, which at one time, yes, included Ukraine and the Baltic states and parts of Finland and Poland. Meanwhile, a former official at Ukraine's state nuclear company, Energoatom, has been designated as a suspect in a corruption scandal. So what I want to point out in this, once again, is that nobody from Ukraine ever said that Ukraine didn't have a corruption problem. Nobody ever. And nobody's denying that the corruption goes pretty damn high, and it is a problem. The big difference is that it is acknowledged, and people, fairly high-ranking people, are persecuted. Okay? So, I don't want to hear from people, especially from the United States, considering the current situation, saying, oh, Ukraine is corrupt, so Russia is doing the right thing. First of all, look at Russia. Second of all, look in the mirror. Third of all, corruption is not a reason to invade a country. Because if that were true, U.S. should be fighting off 7 or 8 other countries at this time, if that was good enough excuse for an invasion. More to come.